The bank called me while my little sister was getting married to ask if I was authorizing over $35,000 in charges on my own credit card. The strange part was, I wasn't even invited to the wedding they were using my card to pay for. That single phone call would expose years of quiet manipulation inside my own family, and the exact moment they realized they had picked the wrong daughter to take advantage of. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Amara Thornton. I'm 37 years old, and until 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning in June, I believed one simple thing. Family always comes first, even when it costs you everything. That belief cracked the moment my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Miss Thornton, this is fraud prevention at Chase. We flagged unusual activity on your black card. Over $35,000 in final balance payments to wedding vendors in Buckhead, all posted within the last few hours. Can you confirm these transactions? I laughed, actually laughed, because I was sitting at my kitchen table in Virginia Highland with my card right there in my wallet. I hadn't bought a thing. But here's the part that should make you sit up. This wasn't a stranger's mistake. Whoever used that card knew my limit, knew my billing address, knew exactly which vendors to visit and in what order. This wasn't random. This was planned. And somewhere between the words Ritz-Carlton Buckhead and floral deposit, I understood something before the agent even finished the sentence. Somebody in my own family had been waiting for this exact day. Before I tell you what happened next, the phone call to my mother, the message I found buried in my own sister's old texts, and the discovery that would make my hands shake, I want you to picture where I was sitting when it all began. Because an hour before that call, my life still looked completely ordinary. Nothing like a drama family show you'd watch on a Sunday afternoon. Stay with me. This story is about to show you exactly how far people will go when they think you'll never find out. It was a quiet Saturday morning, the kind Atlanta gives you only a few times a summer. Warm without being heavy yet, the light coming in low and gold through the kitchen window of my townhouse near Los Angeles Avenue in Virginia Highland. I had my laptop open, halfway through a quarterly report for the firm downtown in Midtown, a mug of coffee going lukewarm beside me. Somewhere outside, a dog was barking at the mail carrier. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary Saturday. I'd been in that apartment 2 years, ever since I made partner track at the accounting firm. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The kind of mine that comes from working every weekend for a decade, so nobody could ever say I hadn't earned it. My phone buzzed against the table. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. I wish, some nights, that I had. The Chase representative's voice was calm, professional, trained not to alarm people, but alarm crept in anyway once she started reading the list out loud. A $5,000 floral order, a luxury dress fitting, a deposit at a restaurant on Peachtree Street I recognized because I'd taken clients there before, a DJ, a photographer, bar service for what she called an event of approximately 150 guests. I felt my stomach drop before my mind caught up. "Ma'am," she said, "do you have an event today? A wedding, perhaps?" I didn't answer right away, because I did know of a wedding happening that day. My little sister Zora's wedding, the one I hadn't been invited to. I told myself, in the seconds after I hung up with the bank, that there had to be an explanation. Maybe someone stole my card number online. Maybe it was a mix-up, some clerical error, some coincidence too strange to be true. But the numbers didn't lie. $35,000, spent exactly where my sister was getting married that very afternoon, on a card only 3 people besides me had ever had access to. I called my mother first. She picked up on the second ring, her voice flat, almost bored, like she'd been expecting this call and had already decided how she'd handle it. "Amara," she said before I could even get a full sentence out, "we wanted the ceremony to be peaceful today. Your being there might make people uncomfortable. You know how you can be, when you've done so well and everyone else hasn't." I sat there holding the phone, staring at nothing, while my own mother explained, without an ounce of shame, why my success made me too inconvenient to invite to my sister's wedding. She hadn't even addressed the money yet. She didn't need to. Her tone told me everything. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. After I hung up, my hands were still shaking, and something told me to check my old messages with Zora. Messages from 4 months earlier. Conversations I'd forgotten even existed. And there it was. A text she'd sent our mother back in February. One I'd never been meant to see. Mom, don't let Amara find out anything about the wedding. She'll make a big deal out of it and complicate everything. I just want one peaceful day. I read it twice. Then a third time, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something less cruel. Looking back, I understand now why I never confronted any of them sooner. Somewhere under all my composure was a little girl who learned that being needed was the closest thing to being loved she was ever going to get, and a woman who was terrified that if she stopped giving, she'd find out she'd never really belonged at all. Staying quiet wasn't weakness. It was the only version of safety I'd ever known inside that family. My sister hadn't just left me off a guest list. She had planned months in advance to make sure I never found out at all. Until the bank called during the reception, and the whole thing came apart in my hands. I sat at my kitchen table with cold coffee and a stranger's voice still echoing in my ear, and I cried the kind of quiet tears you cry when you finally understand something you've suspected for years. My family hadn't just excluded me from one day. They had decided long ago exactly what role I was allowed to play. The one who pays, never the one who belongs. I wiped my face, took a breath, and told myself I'd get through this call, and the next one, and whatever came after. What I didn't know yet was that this message from Zora held one more secret inside it, one I wouldn't uncover until much later, and one that would change how I understood everything that happened next. To understand how I got to that kitchen table, you need to understand the years that came before it. I was the daughter who got the call whenever money ran short. When my father, Malik Thornton, lost his job at the plant a few years back, I was the one who quietly covered his and my mother's rent in Decatur for the better part of a year. No questions asked, no thanks expected. Because that's what a good daughter does, I told myself. When Zora decided she wanted a master's degree, I wrote a check for $18,000 and told her not to worry about paying it back. When my mother wanted to host her big church luncheons at Ebenezer Baptist, the ones with the catered tables and the printed programs, I was the one who quietly picked up the tab so she could stand at the front of the fellowship hall looking like a woman whose family had never struggled a day in their lives. I told myself this was love. I told myself this was what family meant for people like us. You carry each other because the world doesn't carry you. But there was another side to it. One I didn't let myself look at too closely for a long time. Every Sunday after service, we'd gather at my parents' house, and the conversation always circled the same way. Someone would compliment Zora's dress, her hair, her sweetness. Someone would ask me, gently but pointedly, "So when are you going to settle down, Amara? All that work and no ring to show for it." As if my career were something to apologize for. As if my paying for everyone's needs made me less of a woman, not more of one. I let it roll off of me for years, the kind of drama family dynamic that hides itself inside good manners and casserole dishes. I told myself the comparisons didn't matter, that love doesn't keep score. I was wrong about that, but it would take a bank fraud call to teach me. The Saturday after the wedding call, I drove out to my parents' house in Decatur to go through old records, trying to understand exactly how deep this went. I thought about the last time I'd been there before that, helping my mother fix a jammed garbage disposal a few months earlier, my bag sitting by the front door the whole afternoon while she kept an eye on it for me. I hadn't thought twice about it at the time. My mother still had an old desktop computer in the den, one she barely used except for email and solitaire, and I sat down at it while she was outside, telling myself I was only looking for old receipts. What I found was a draft email, never sent, sitting in her outbox. The subject line read, "If Amara finds out." I opened it with my heart already pounding. The body of the email was short, but it told me everything. If she finds out, just tell everyone she's jealous. She's always been quiet about this kind of thing. She won't do anything about it. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling something in my chest go cold and still. My mother hadn't just taken my money without asking. She had planned, in advance, exactly how she would explain it away if I ever noticed, and the plan relied entirely on the idea that I would stay silent, the way I always had. I kept digging. Old bank statements I'd printed months ago for my own taxes showed something I'd never paid attention to before. A recurring transfer, $300 to $500 a month, going out to something labeled Zora's Emergency Fund. When I traced it back, it wasn't an emergency fund at all. It was a joint account my mother and sister had opened together, quietly, and had been feeding for over a year, using small transfers that never raised any flags, slowly prepaying pieces of a wedding I didn't even know was being planned. This wasn't one bad afternoon. This wasn't a moment of poor judgment during a stressful week. This was a system, built slowly and carefully, with me positioned at the center of it as the funding source and nowhere in it as a person who mattered. I closed the laptop with my hands still trembling, the weight of it settling into my chest like something physical. Somewhere in the house, I could hear my mother's television playing a rerun, oblivious or pretending to be. I thought about all the years I'd told myself this was love. I thought about the porch swing at their house that had been creaking since I was a little girl, the same one my father always swore he'd fix and never did. Some things in that family never changed. I was starting to understand that I might be one of the things that had to. I gathered my things to leave, still shaken, still turning it all over in my mind. How deep this went, how long it had been planned, how many people had known and said nothing. I didn't know yet that someone else outside my parents' house had already seen pieces of this plan too, and that his phone call, coming in just a few hours, would break something else open entirely. So tell me straight, if you found that email on your own mother's computer, would you confront her on the spot or gather more proof first? Comment 1 for confront now, or 2 for gather proof first. I want to see which side wins before the next part. The call came from Jamal, my sister's new husband, less than a day after I'd reported the fraudulent charges and the bank had frozen my card. His voice was low, careful, like he was speaking from somewhere he didn't want to be overheard. "Amara," he said, "I found something in Zora's bag, a note with your card number written on it, and next to it, in your mother's handwriting, Mom already copied it." I gripped the phone tighter. "There's more," he said. "A text from your mom to Zora. It says if you ever found out, Zora should just tell everyone you must have left your wallet somewhere and forgotten, that it was your own carelessness." I sat with that for a long moment, the phone warm against my ear, my mind trying and failing to make it make sense. My own sister hadn't just known. She had helped build the explanation they'd use against me, the one designed to make the whole thing look like my mistake instead of their theft. A few hours later, the bank's fraud team sent over a security clip one of the Buckhead florists had turned up, time-stamped, clear, hard to argue with. My mother and father were in it, as I'd expected, so was Zora, signing the deposit slip and reciting my card number to the clerk from memory. But watching it a second time, I noticed something I'd missed. The way her hand paused, just slightly, before she signed. A half-second of hesitation I couldn't explain yet. I didn't have room to wonder about it, not that day. I sat with my phone in my lap for a long time after that clip, replaying the moment her hand moved across the paper. Some part of me had been holding out hope that she was innocent in all this, dragged along by our mother the way she'd always been dragged along by everything. That hope didn't survive what I saw. Whatever her reasons were, she had been there, and she had signed. What I didn't fully grasp yet was the machinery behind my mother, Bernice. Her whole sense of worth had been built on appearing to run a picture-perfect household, and Zora, sweeter, softer, easier to control, had always been the daughter who made that picture look effortless. My competence threatened her because a daughter who didn't need managing was a daughter she couldn't claim credit for. Punishing me quietly and rewarding Zora's compliance wasn't cruelty to her. It was maintenance of the only kind of order she knew how to keep. My phone rang again almost immediately. My mother. "Amara, do you have any idea what you've done?" Her voice had gone flat and hard, the way it did when she'd already decided she was right. "You called the bank. You involved them in the middle of your sister's wedding day over money that doesn't even matter to you." "It's $35,000, I said quietly. "You make more than that in a month," she said, "and you couldn't just let your sister have one day without making it about you?" I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything left to say to a woman who genuinely believed that my silence was owed to her, that my success obligated me to fund whatever she and my sister decided to take from me. Zora called next, her voice already thick with tears before I answered. "Why would you do this to me?" she said. "You couldn't just be happy for me? You had to get the bank involved during my wedding?" "Zora," I said, keeping my voice as even as I could manage, "I've seen the footage. I know you signed for the deposit." There was a pause on the line, just long enough for me to hear her breathing shift. Then, instead of the apology I might have hoped for, she pivoted straight to blame. "You're jealous," she said. "You've always been jealous that I have Jamal, that I have a life, that people actually like being around me. You had to ruin it." I sat there in my kitchen, phone against my ear, and felt something inside me go very still and very quiet. This wasn't a woman who'd made one desperate mistake and panicked. This was a woman reciting a story she and our mother had clearly built together, weeks in advance, in case this exact moment ever came. This wasn't drama family gossip for a group chat anymore. This was a felony fraud claim with a paper trail nobody could talk their way around. I thought about all those Sundays at Ebenezer Baptist, all those luncheons, all those years I'd told myself that keeping the peace was worth whatever it cost me. None of it matched what I was hearing on the other end of that phone line. "I'm not going to argue with you about this," I told Zora. "The bank has the footage. This isn't about jealousy. This is about $35,000 taken off my card without my knowledge by people I trusted." She hung up on me. My mother called back within minutes, her tone climbing colder instead of louder, blaming me for embarrassing the family, for making a scene, for daring to protect what was mine instead of quietly absorbing the loss the way I always had before. I sat alone long after the calls stopped coming, staring at the wall, feeling something in me shift from grief into something steadier and more resolved. There was still a piece of this I didn't understand. That half-second hesitation in Zora's hand on the security clip kept surfacing in my mind, uninvited, refusing to fit neatly into the story I'd already decided to believe about her. But even as I sat there, I knew this wasn't over. And the next call I received would bring in someone from outside the family entirely, someone whose reaction and whose reasons would change the shape of everything that came after. That night, the kitchen had gone dark except for the small light above the stove. The low gold kind that makes a room feel smaller and safer than it had all day. I was sitting with my phone face down on the table, not ready for another voice, when the screen lit up anyway. Not a call, a text. A name I hadn't seen in months. "Amara, I'm sorry I believed your mother. She told the family group chat that you make plenty of money, but you're stingy, that you wouldn't help your sister with her wedding. I just found out today that she used your card. I'm so sorry, baby. Corinne." I read it once, and my thumb hovered over the screen without pressing anything. The way you hesitate before touching something you're afraid might not be real. I read it a second time before I let myself believe it. For the first time since the bank had called that morning, something in my chest loosened. Not all the way, just enough to let me breathe a little deeper than I had in hours. I thought of Corinne at Sunday dinners 20 years ago, the only adult in that house who used to tell my mother, half joking and half not, "Let the girl eat her dessert before she does the dishes, Bernice." Small things, things I'd forgotten I remembered until that moment. It made sense somehow that if anyone in that family was going to break rank, it would be her. I sat with the phone in my lap for a long while after that, the stove light humming faintly, the house otherwise silent in the particular way a house is silent when it's holding its breath along with you. I found myself scrolling back through old photos without meaning to, a habit my hands seemed to know before my mind caught up. A picture of me at maybe 11 or 12, standing next to my father at the plant's holiday party, my hand already reaching into my little purse because he'd whispered that he was short for the raffle ticket. I didn't remember minding. I remembered feeling proud, actually, that I was the one who could help. I hadn't understood, not then, that pride was the very thing being cultivated in me, that somewhere in that gesture was the first quiet rehearsal for every check I'd write for the next 25 years. I set the phone down and pressed my palms flat against the cool wood of the table, grounding myself the way you do when a memory surfaces heavier than you expected it to be. I didn't get much more time to sit with it. Headlights swept briefly across my living room window, then went dark, and a few moments later there was a knock at my door. Not the sharp, urgent knock of an emergency, but the familiar, entitled rhythm I'd have recognized anywhere. My mother never asked to come in. She simply arrived. I opened the door to find both of my parents on my small porch, my mother a half step ahead of my father, the way she always positioned herself when she intended to do the talking. The porch light caught the sharp angles of her face, and for a moment she didn't look at me at all. She looked past me, into the house, taking inventory. "This new place is lovely, Amara," she said, almost carelessly, running her eyes along the hallway behind me. "Corinne posted the address in the group chat back when you first moved, said how proud she was of you." It landed differently than I expected. Not as a compliment, as information. They hadn't come because they missed me, or because they were worried about how I was holding up after everything. They'd come because they wanted the fraud claim dropped, and they'd used a stranger's pride in me as a map to my front door. My father stood a step behind her on the porch, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, his eyes fixed somewhere on the welcome mat like it might tell him what to do. He hadn't said a word yet. He wouldn't for the rest of the conversation. That silence had a shape I'd known my whole life. The particular quiet of a man who had decided, decades ago, that peace meant letting his wife's decisions stand in for his own. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't invite them in either, not really. I simply turned and walked to my desk, aware of the sound of their footsteps following me over the threshold uninvited, the door swinging shut behind them on its own weight. I pulled up the email I'd found on my mother's old computer and turned my laptop screen toward her. "If Amara finds out," I read aloud, keeping my voice level even as my pulse wasn't, "just tell everyone she's jealous. She's always been quiet about this kind of thing. She won't do anything about it." I watched her face while I read it. I watched the exact moment the color left it. Not dramatically, not all at once, but the way a room dims when a cloud passes over the sun, gradual and total. Her jaw worked once, like she meant to speak, and then didn't. Her hand found the back of my armchair and rested there, not for support exactly, but as if she needed somewhere to put it. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She just stood there, silent, in a way I had never once seen her be silent before. Their whole family playbook laid out in black and white on a laptop screen, and not one word left to defend it with. It was Zora, standing behind our parents in my doorway, who broke first. I hadn't even fully registered that she'd come with them until I heard her breath catch. Tears were already streaming down her face by the time I turned toward her, one hand gripping the strap of her bag so tightly her knuckles had gone pale, the other pressed flat against her collarbone like she was trying to hold something inside her chest in place. "I tried to stop her," she said, so quietly I almost missed it under the hum of the refrigerator behind me. "More than once. But Mom said she'd cut off all the help she gives me if I didn't go along with it. I didn't tell you because I was scared you'd hate me." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she pressed the back of her wrist against her mouth for a second before continuing. "That hesitation you probably saw on that video? I almost said no right there, in front of the florist. I didn't have it in me." I understood her more than I wanted to admit in that moment. Zora had grown up watching me get praised for what I could provide, and dismissed for who I actually was. And she'd learned the opposite survival trick. Stay soft, stay agreeable, and Mom will protect you instead of using you. Her fear wasn't really of me. It was of becoming the daughter who lost our mother's approval, the one lesson our family had drilled into both of us since childhood, just aimed in two different directions. I thought, standing there, of every Sunday luncheon where Zora had been complimented for her sweetness, while I was complimented for my checkbook. Two currencies, both of them ways of buying the same thing, a mother's conditional love. I looked at my sister, the woman who had signed her name on that deposit slip, who had helped write the story that painted me as careless instead of robbed, and I thought back to that half-second pause I couldn't explain on the security footage. It didn't undo what she'd done. It didn't make the theft any less real, but for the first time, I saw someone else trapped in the same machine that had used me for years, even as she'd let it use me too. Nobody said anything for a moment. The only sound in the house was the low tick of the clock above my stove, and my father shifting his weight from one foot to the other on the hardwood, still silent, still staring at that welcome mat. "I think you should go," I said finally, my voice quiet but steady. "All of you. I need the night." My mother opened her mouth once more and then closed it again when she saw my face. She turned first, my father following a beat behind her without a word, and Zora lingered in the doorway just a second longer, like she was waiting for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or at least a softer look than the one I was giving her. I didn't have either to offer her yet. She left too. I closed the door and stood with my back against it for a long moment, listening to their car pull away down the quiet street, the porch light outside washing a pale yellow line across my floor. That night, after my parents finally left, my phone rang one more time. It was Jamal. "I've moved out," he said quietly, and I could hear, underneath the words, the particular exhaustion of a man who'd spent the last 24 hours turning something over and over in his mind before deciding it needed saying out loud. "Just for now. I need some space to think." He paused, and I heard him exhale, long and slow, like he was choosing his next words carefully. "I want you to know something. I'd noticed little things before all this. The way Zora used to go quiet whenever your name came up at family dinners. The way your mother would change the subject a beat too fast. I told myself it wasn't my business. I wish I hadn't." Another pause. "I can't start a marriage on top of something built like this. We're going to try counseling, but I needed you to know. I don't think less of Zora for being scared. I just can't pretend this didn't happen." I sat alone afterward in a house that suddenly felt very quiet, the porch light outside casting long shadows across my living room floor. Everyone who had once made up the picture of my family had scattered into pieces. My mother exposed, my father silent, my sister crying, her marriage now uncertain, an aunt standing quietly on my side. I stayed on the couch a long time, not moving, letting the day settle into me the way sediment settles at the bottom of still water. At some point, I noticed my own reflection faintly in the dark window glass, and I didn't recognize the stillness on my own face. Not devastated, not triumphant, just tired in a way that felt, for once, like the end of something rather than the middle of it. I still had one decision left to make, one that would determine everything that came after. Whether I would let the fraud claim run its course, whether I would finally, fully choose myself. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I already sensed that this decision would reshape my relationship with Zora for good, in ways I couldn't yet predict. I woke the next morning to the same kind of light that had been coming through my kitchen window the day the bank first called. Warm, low, gold, deceptively gentle for everything it had witnessed in the past 48 hours. I lay still for a minute before getting up, listening to the house, half expecting my phone to ring again. It didn't. That silence, I realized, was its own kind of answer. I made coffee I actually let myself finish this time, and I sat back down at the same kitchen table where this had all started, the bank's file spread out in front of me. The security footage, the statements, my mother's draft email, all of it laid out like evidence in a case that had already, quietly, been decided. I thought about calling the fraud team that morning and asking them to close it out, to let the money go, to smooth things over the way I'd smoothed over every conflict in that family for as long as I could remember. It would have been easy. It would have been what they expected. For a moment, staring at the printed statements, I actually reached for my phone to do exactly that. Old muscle memory, the same reflex that had written a check for my sister's degree and covered a year of my parents' rent without a single condition attached. I held the phone in my hand for almost a full minute before I set it back down. I thought of being 10 years old, sitting on the edge of my parents' bed, while my mother explained, gently but firmly, that I was the strong one, now that my father was between jobs. That Zora was too little to understand and didn't need to worry about things like that. I hadn't questioned it then. I'd felt chosen. It would take me another 27 years to understand that being chosen for a burden isn't the same thing as being chosen for love. Instead of calling the bank, I picked up the phone and called my parents. My mother answered on the first ring, which told me she'd been waiting, phone in hand, since the moment they'd left my porch the night before. "I'm not doing this out of hatred," I told them, my voice calm in a way that surprised even me. I could hear my father's breathing somewhere in the background, close to the receiver, saying nothing, the way he always did. But I'm not the family bank anymore. I won't lie to the fraud investigators, and I won't pretend this didn't happen just to keep the peace. My mother started to argue, her voice rising the way it always had whenever I said no to anything. A sharp, practiced climb I'd heard my whole life, the one meant to make me feel young and unreasonable again. I let her finish this time instead of retreating into the old habit of going quiet until she was done. Then I said, gently but firmly, "I love you, but I'm done." I hung up before she could respond, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, the silence that followed didn't feel like guilt. It felt like relief. A physical thing, a loosening across my shoulders I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. The bank's investigation ran its course over the following weeks. There was one evening, about 10 days in, when a fraud investigator called with a routine follow-up question, and something in his neutral, procedural tone made the whole thing feel suddenly real and irreversible in a way it hadn't before. I sat on my kitchen floor that night, not the table, the floor, my back against the cabinets, and let myself cry for a while. Not because I doubted my decision, but because some part of me still grieved the family I'd wanted them to be, instead of the one they actually were. I didn't call anyone. I didn't need to. I just let it move through me, and by morning, it had. The full amount taken from my account was eventually recovered and returned. The claim was resolved entirely in my favor, the paper trail making it impossible for anyone to argue otherwise. The emails, the footage, the transfers, all of it told the same story, whether my family wanted to hear it or not. Late one night, near the end of it all, my phone buzzed with a message from Zora. "I'm sorry, I tried to stop Mom more than once, but she threatened to cut off her help if I didn't go along with it. I was scared to tell you because I thought you'd hate me. I didn't want my marriage to start this way either." I sat with the message for a long time before answering, my thumb hovering over the keyboard through 3 different drafts. The first one was angrier than I meant it to be. The second one forgave her more completely than I actually felt. I deleted both. I thought about the porch swing at my parents' house, still creaking the same way it had my whole childhood. I thought about all the ways my family had learned to survive by using each other, and how Zora had grown up watching our mother do exactly what she'd done to me. It didn't erase what she'd done, but it helped me understand it. I wrote back something short, not a forgiveness, not yet, just an acknowledgement that I'd received her words and that I needed time. I wasn't ready to promise her anything more than that. In the weeks that followed, I finished moving fully into my home in Virginia Highland, a house that belonged to no one but me, bought with money no one else had a claim to, filled with furniture no one else had chosen. I remember standing in the doorway one Sunday afternoon with a box of kitchen towels in my arms, sunlight cutting a long, clean line across the floorboards, and feeling something settle in my chest that had nothing to do with anger or vindication. There was something almost sacred about closing that front door each evening, knowing that nothing inside those walls could be used against me, borrowed from me, or quietly taken while I wasn't looking. I didn't know yet exactly what my relationship with Zora would become, or whether my parents would ever fully understand what they'd cost themselves by treating me the way they had for so many years. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting anxiously to find out. I was simply living, one quiet day at a time, in a home that was finally completely mine. And somewhere, unknown to me still, someone had been quietly watching all of this unfold from a distance. Someone who had believed in me long before I ever knew his name. The months after the case closed were the quietest, steadiest months of my adult life. I threw myself back into my work downtown in Midtown, and within the year, I was promoted to senior partner track ahead of schedule. Not because of any drama in my personal life, but because I finally had the emotional space to do my job without constantly managing a family crisis in the background. I remember the morning the partners called me into the glass conference room on the 11th floor, the city spread out gray and gold below us through the window, and realizing halfway through their congratulations that my hands weren't shaking the way they used to before every big meeting. My colleagues noticed the difference before I did. I slept better, I laughed more easily, I stopped flinching every time my phone rang. I also fully settled into my house in Virginia Highland. I planted flowers along the little front walk that spring, the kind my mother used to grow when I was young, and felt no bitterness in doing it. Only a quiet pride that this version of home was entirely my own choice. Some evenings I'd sit on the front steps with the hose still in my hand, watching the water bead on the leaves, and think about how strange it was that peace could feel this ordinary. On weekends, I started volunteering with a financial literacy program for young Black professionals near Piedmont Park, teaching workshops on budgeting, credit, and how to protect yourself financially, even, I told them gently, from people you love. The room was usually a converted community hall with folding chairs and a whiteboard that never quite erased clean, and I liked it that way, unpretentious, honest. One evening, a young woman about Zora's age lingered after a session and asked me, almost apologetically, how you tell the difference between helping family and being used by them. I didn't tell her my story. I just told her that if the giving only ever moved in one direction, that was the answer, whether anyone said it out loud or not. I never named names in those workshops. I didn't need to. The lesson mattered more than the story behind it. It was at one of those community events that I met Marcus Brooks. He was an architect, soft-spoken, the kind of man who listened more than he talked. I noticed him before we ever spoke, standing near the back of the hall during one of my sessions, arms loosely crossed, nodding slowly at something I'd said about setting spending boundaries with people you love, like it had landed somewhere specific for him, too. We ended up in a long conversation after the workshop, about nothing in particular at first. Atlanta traffic, the humidity, a building he was restoring near Old Fourth Ward, the way the late light hit its old brick facade in the evenings and made the whole block look like it belonged to another decade. He never once asked about my family, never pried, never made me feel like I owed him an explanation for anything. It was weeks later, over coffee at a small place near the Beltline, the espresso machine hissing steadily behind the counter, that he told me something that caught me completely off guard. I actually knew who you were before we met here, he said, turning his cup slowly on the table, smiling a little sheepishly. A few years ago, at a cookout after church, I heard your mother telling people in the family group chat that you were successful but stingy, that you wouldn't help your sister. I didn't know you personally, but something about it didn't sit right with me. He shrugged, almost embarrassed by his own honesty. My own mother raised us to believe you don't get to complain about someone's absence at your table if you never actually made room for them. I almost said something that day. I didn't because it wasn't my place, but I never forgot it. I sat there, coffee cooling in front of me, feeling something in my chest crack open in a way I hadn't expected. For years, while I believed I was completely alone in how my family saw me, a stranger had quietly recognized the unfairness of it, had quietly been on my side without my ever knowing his name. I'm glad you said something now, I told him. He smiled. I'm glad I got the chance to. We kept talking after that, slowly, carefully, the way two people build something meant to last rather than something meant to impress. There was a particular Sunday afternoon, months into knowing each other, when he helped me hang a set of shelves in my living room, and I caught myself watching him double-check the level twice before drilling a single hole, patient in a way that had nothing to do with performance. And I remember thinking, quietly, this is what it feels like when no one is keeping score. Marcus never once made me feel like my family's dysfunction was a burden he was tolerating. He simply treated me like someone whose peace mattered, someone worth listening to without conditions attached. As for my family, things settled into something quieter than before, if not entirely resolved. My mother and I speak occasionally, carefully, at a distance that suits us both for now, a birthday call, a brief holiday text. Nothing that asks either of us to pretend more has healed than actually has. My father remains mostly silent, the way he always has, letting my mother's decisions stand in for his own. Though once, on the phone, he told me quietly that he was proud of the house I'd bought, and it was the closest thing to an apology I think he knows how to give. Zora and I are rebuilding something, slowly. Not the relationship we had before, but something new, built on honesty instead of obligation. We talk most weeks now, careful and a little tentative still, but real in a way our old closeness never quite was. Her marriage to Jamal survived in the end, though it took real work and real counseling to get there. I think in the end, our whole drama family story became the thing that finally taught both of us how to tell the truth to each other. I think often about that porch swing at my parents' house, still creaking the same way it has since I was a little girl. Some things don't change. But I have. I no longer measure my worth by how much I can give away or how quietly I can absorb what other people take from me. One evening, sitting on my own porch in Virginia Highland with Marcus beside me, the streetlights just beginning to flicker on down the block and the cicadas starting up their low summer hum in the trees, I said out loud something I'd been thinking for months. I lost the family I thought I had, but I found myself instead, and I found people who actually see me. He took my hand and we sat there together as the streetlights came on fully, the kind of quiet, steady peace I never thought I'd feel again. This story reminds us that the family we're born into doesn't get a lifetime pass to spend our money, our time, and our peace without asking. If you're sitting in your kitchen this morning, quietly writing another check because that's just what you do, call your bank this week and set up a spending alert on every card, the kind that texts you the moment a charge over $50 goes through. Ask your own children, in plain words, what they'd actually say about you if you left the room. If the answer scares you, that's information, not paranoia. Keep a folder, a real one, in a drawer where you write down every loan you've made and every promise that never got paid back. Not to punish anyone, but so you remember your own worth in black and white. And when your grandchildren visit, let them watch you say no to something small, so they grow up knowing that love and being used are two different things. You've spent a lifetime tending to everyone else's Sunday dinners. Let this next chapter be the one where somebody finally tends to you, starting with these small, ordinary steps that keep your own front door truly yours.